قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم والله غفور رحيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين وحكمة النبيين وعلم النبيين وحلم النبيين وصبر النبيين ونور النبيين. اللهم افتح إلينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to everyone. Session 24, I believe now. We are continuing from where we left off last week, which was the period of persecution. And this week, inshallah, I want to look at Abyssinia and the migration, the first hijrah that was made to Abyssinia. And I think this is a very amazing part of the seerah, even though the Prophet ﷺ is not directly involved in this chapter of the seerah. But I think it is a really amazing part of the seerah. So I want to dedicate today's entire session to this. I tried my level best to find accurate sources to really build the whole picture, because I know a lot of us have only received like snippets and general ideas of what transpired. So inshallah, I'm going to try and go as deep as I possibly can within the time period that we have. So Abyssinia at the time, it was called Habasha, but the Abyssinia, this is what you call an exonym. It's an external name given to a certain place, and not what that the people who live there give or name it themselves. Like Egypt, for example, is an exonym. The people of Egypt did not call themselves Egyptians. This was what the Greeks called them. So that's an exonym. That's a name given by an external source. And so Abyssinia is an external name. Ethiopia is an external name. They themselves were, their kingdom was called the Kingdom of Aksum, or the Aksumite Empire. And their capital city was the city of Aksum. And at that time, this is around maybe the 3rd century, thereabouts, they were basically one of 4 superpowers in the world, which included the Romans, the Persians, and the Chinese, and so the Aksumites as well. These were one of 4 superpowers in the world. At the time, the Aksumite Kingdom it encompassed, the heart of it was Eritrea. So if you open up the map, if you look at the map of the East Africa, or what's known as the Horn of Africa, and just about where the Red Sea is and southern Arabia, you will see there is Eritrea, there is Djibouti, there's Ethiopia, and then Sudan is bordering it. So at that time, the Aksumite Empire, it included all of these, or parts of these nations, but its heart really was Eritrea and Djibouti. So, and then it encompassed part of Sudan, and then part of Yemen was also part of Aksum, because by that time, the Yemeni kingdom, which was basically not the Yemeni kingdom per se, but the Himyarite kingdom, was basically overthrown. The Aksumites, I don't remember under which ruler it was, had come into, by the help of Justinian. Well, the Roman Emperor Justinian came in with a large force and overthrew Dhu who was the perpetrator of torturing those Christians, the Christians of Najran, which I mentioned earlier before as well. The Prophet ﷺ acknowledged them. So from that point onwards, really, Southern Arabia didn't have a kingdom per se. So it was basically part of, it was in their control. And they minted their own coin, which was really something as a nation. The Romans minted their own coins as well. And these coins, which were Aksumite coins, have been found in as far as China and as far as Europe as well. So, they had a very strong, powerful presence in the world at that time. They traded with Hind. They basically controlled that channel coming in from the Roman Empire, from Syria, cutting through the Yemeni coast, and then going across the Indian Ocean into now towards India and China and East Asia. Their ruler was the Arabs called them the rulers Najāshī, which is a transliteration in Arabic of the term Negus, if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know how the language was pronounced. The language it's called Ge'ez. Ge'ez is the parent language of Amharic, and Ge'ez is still used even till today in liturgy, for example, among the Orthodox Church of Ethiopia and among the Orthodox Jews living there also, who are Eritrean or Aksumite in origin. They're not Semitic, they are Hamitic, because at a certain time, Aksum also took over Kush, and Kush, the people of Kush, were one of the descendants of Ham. They were Hamites. So these are the Kushites basically the Kushites of East Africa. If you don't know Africa as a continent itself, there are three major groups or categories of people that are known. There are the Bantu people, which are from the central southern Africa. There are the Nilotic people, who are from the western part of Africa mostly, and then there are the Kushitic people, who are from the eastern, northeastern side of Africa. So these were, because at that time, this is going back now during Musa's time as well, when the Egyptians were in power. So the Jews had lived there for a very long time. So the Hebrew religion had spread quite a lot among them as well. His name, the Najāshī at the time, it's debated as to what his name actually is. The Sirah doesn't record his name; it just refers to him as Najāshī, or al-Najāshī as the ruler, or the Najāshī, the king. But his name is not really recorded. Some of the Orientalist historians say it may have been like Arma or Ashama. They don't have any written records from that time period either. In fact, it's very hard to even determine who this Najāshī was based on some of the known rulers of Aksum at that time. But it's very interesting. They have a rich history that goes back to pre-modern times, and it's very interesting to also note that the Aksumites were also, in terms of theology, they were with or together with the Coptics of Egypt in doctrine, going back during the early stages of Christianity, before the Nicene Creed was formulated, who were very much in opposition to the idea of the divinity of Christ, which unfortunately over later periods, essentially, because the Nicene Creed sort of unified all these different doctrinal views, so they kind of codified that eventually. But anyway, that's a very complex subject to get into. Now, with the atrocities, reaching now new heights as they're increasing, the Prophet ﷺ then proposed to the Muslims that, why don't you go over to this land, to Abyssinia? He said to them, لو خرجتم إلى أرض الحبشة فإن بها ملكا لا يظلم عنده أحد وهي أرض صدق حتى يجعل الله لكم فرجا مما أنتم فيه. You know, if you were to go to the land of Habasha, you would find there that there is a king there who is not unjust to anyone under him, and the land is a land of truth. It's a land of sincerity. So, you know, why don't you go there until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us relief, or grants you relief from this suffering. So, you know, this being the first hijrah, it was also, you know, kind of like a preparation for them, readying them, so to speak. Because hijrah is, you know, it's a supplementary pillar of Islam. It's not a fundamental pillar, but when one of the things about religion in philosophy is that every religion faces opposition from a non-religious body, and that opposition always results in a kind of a loss, for a suffering for the religious group, because the non-religious group has no morals or ethics by which they operate, whereas the religious group typically tends to operate under some moral or ethical code, such as not to harm another person or to speak ill of another person or any such thing. Now, this can happen among radicalists as well, and extremists, which is why the Prophet ﷺ warned against going to extreme or stretching the deen to extreme limits until it now starts, you know, you start finding ways to justify atrocities. We're talking about the Islam that is the balance between domains, not talking about the kind of extremist views that result in persecuting other people who are of a different religion. But typically, because at that point now you lose your morality and your ethical foundations. So those who are now being persecuted, the idea here is that you can either endure the persecution, or now, for the sake of preserving your religion, you can leave that place and go somewhere else where you might have have this freedom now to continue practicing your religion without fear of persecution. And so this is what it's preparing them for, because hijrah, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing today. It definitely was not an easy thing at that time, especially given among people who are not nomadic individuals, nomadic people, which is pretty much the whole of the world today. But at that time, there were certain groups of people who were nomadic by nature, like the Turks, for example, the Mongols. These groups of individuals, these were nomadic people. They moved from land to land with their flock. They lived in makeshift homes that were not, fixed, like wood and stone, mostly tents. These were nomadic people. Many of the, some of the Semitic groups of people were also nomadic people. But the Arabs had long settled, especially in the Hijazi region, because they'd established themselves over the centuries. So since the Prophet Ismail's time. So it's really a very new concept for them. And so now they're being prepared for this. This is like really a moderate thing. And what's interesting about this is the Prophet ﷺ chose the land of Abyssinia as opposed to any other land nearby. Because if you look at the geography, Abyssinia is much further away than, like Aksum is much further away than Yathrib or Taif or any of the surrounding other towns or villages or any other place where they might have gone. And Abyssinia is also a Christian majority. And the Prophet ﷺ chose that. I mean, there's divine wisdom in this, because it is consistent with the Quran's message that there is a lot more in terms of similarity than there is in terms of difference. And there is a kind of an eschatology that's also playing out, whereby the Quran itself testifies that you will find in time to come that there is much more, closeness with the Christians than there is with the Jews. And so, and like I said, it's not an easy journey to go on either, because they have to cut across the desert, then they have to barter for sea passage across the sea, across the Red Sea, and to get into Eritrea at that point. So it's not an easy journey to make, but they do make it, and he leaves it open to anyone who wants to sort of volunteer for this. There's no imposition on anyone to say so and so you have to do it, or so and so, like that. So there's the first group of migrants who set out, and they were roughly around just 20 people, about 20 or so men and women. There was Ruqayya and Uthman and his wife Ruqayya. They set out as well. It's not given whether it was during the journey or when she was already in Abyssinia that she had a miscarriage. But then after 3 years later of staying in Abyssinia, they had another child. They had a son whom they named Abdullah. There was Abu Hudhayfa ibn Utbah and Sahla bin Suhail. Their son was also born in Abyssinia. They named him Muhammad. There was Zubair ibn Awam. There was Mus'ab ibn Umair. There was Abdurrahman ibn Auf. Both Abu Salama and Salama migrated as well. Uthman ibn Mas'un was among them, and he was basically there because he was their Amir, the first group who went out, Uthman ibn Mas'un. He went with his son, As-Sa'ib, and both of his brothers, Qudama and Abdullah. Then there was Amr ibn Rabi'ah and his wife Layla. There was Abu Sabra ibn Abu Ruhm and his wife Kulthum bin Suhail. Now Suhail, if you remember, is Abu Yazid. So his daughter got married to Abu Sabra. And when Suhail, I think I mentioned this last or previous session, Suhail actually, almost everyone in his family became Muslim except him. It was very interesting. All his brothers and basically almost all his children, I think. So his daughter, he had already made these marriages. Both of his son-in-laws became Muslim, and then both his daughters along with that, and then both of his sons as well, and then 3 of his brothers became Muslim, and they all migrated to, well, not all of them, like his 2 sons remained behind. But Abu Sabra and Suhail's daughter Kulthum, they migrated to Abyssinia. Then there was, I don't remember many of the others. I think there was Hatib ibn Amr, and then there was I don't remember who else was there. They were about 20 of them, men and women. So this is like the first group that went out. Then there was the second group, and Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham also, they list somewhere around 80 men and another 20 women. By the way, this does not include their children who are with them, although he mentions a few of the children. But this was really the second. So you're looking at maybe around 150 people, possibly somewhere maybe around 170 overall, for including the first group and the second group, which then included Ja'far, Abu Talib's son, and his wife Asma. There was some say that Ammar ibn Yasir went. That's a strong opinion, but others say no, he did not go to Abyssinia. But there are a few narrations that suggest that he did. There was Amr ibn Sa'id and his wife Fatima bin Safwan. There was his brother Amr's brother Khalid and his wife Amina. The whole Jahshi family, Abdullah ibn Jahsh and his brother Ubaidullah and his wife Habiba, they both migrated. Ubaidullah, unfortunately, I don't know, he decided to become Christian when he was there in Abyssinia. And Habiba, who is Ramla. She is Abu Sufyan's daughter, Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harb, his daughter. It's believed that upon him becoming Christian, they separated. Now, whether this constitutes as a legal precedent for divorce upon apostasy, that's a debatable issue, matter among the scholars. Ibn Ishaq does not record this separation, and Ibn Hisham also doesn't. And there is no authentic hadith that speaks on the matter in detail. Only that they no longer were, living together per se. And then after some time, he died. She actually stayed there for almost 10 years, thereabouts, almost 10 years in Abyssinia. Before eventually the Prophet ﷺ, when he had migrated to Medina, he sent a proposal for her. And the Najāshī acted on his behalf, on the Prophet's behalf, and paid a dowry of 400 dirham. And then later on, she came back to Arabia with Ja'far and the others, and they moved to Medina. This happened after the conquest of Khaybar. So that was the Jahshi family. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud went. His brother Utbah ibn Mas'ud also went. Ayyash ibn Abi Rabi'ah went. Ayyash is Abu Jahl's cousin and also his half brother. And then Abu Yazid, Suhail Abu Yazid's brother Sakran went, and his wife Sauda, she also went. Sauda got married to the Prophet ﷺ after Khadija passed. His other brother Hatib ibn Amr, he also went. And then there was Salit or Sulayt, his other brother also went. So all three of Abu Yazid's brother, Suhail's brother, went to Abyssinia, migrated to Abyssinia. And the whole list is there in the Sirah of Ibn Hisham. So you can take a look at all those individuals who went there. Now the Quraysh, they were now getting very concerned, because now, like I just mentioned, Abu Yazid, Suhail, who is a noble Qurayshi and the lead chief of his own tribe, and then you've got Abu Jahl and some of his family members, and then you've got other individuals who are also so they're seeing all this happening, and now they're getting even more concerned because the persecution is not working the way they want it to. And now their family members are fleeing. And this is now going to create a big problem, because if the rest of the Arab world now came to know what's going on, it lowers. See, this is how their Jahili thinking was. They're only looking at these materialistic aspects of their lives. They're going to lose business, they'll lose their standing, they'll lose their nobility, they'll lose, etc., etc. This is what they're looking at. And so really it's about their ego, you see. Each of these individuals, they're really just trying to protect their own ego and their image. So they hold council now, the Quraysh, and some of them suggest, let's try and cut them off, intercept them, forcefully pull them back. Let's do this, let's do that. And then they look at the logistics of everything and they realize, well, there's not much we can do now except, go there, meet with the authorities, the Abyssinian authorities, and see if we can get them to forcefully evict these, Muslims from Abyssinia, and then we can take over. That way, it's also going to shame them, you see? Like, you try to go there, but we have our own reach there. You can't escape from us, you see? So they select two individuals who have excellent oratory skills, and one of them has had dealings with the Abyssinians. He trades with them, so he has some friendliness with them. This is Amr ibn al-As, and the other one is Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'ah. Ibn Abi Rabi'ah, sorry, Abi Rabi'ah, Abdullah and Amr. And so they tell these two, they give them instructions now. The Qurayshi elders now, they give them instructions. They say, idfa'a ila kulli bitriqin. This is what you do first. First, you take gifts. So they're going to put all these gifts together. And one of the things that Salama narrates and says that one of the things that they really wanted as gifts were animal skin, pelts, because they liked to have that for decoration and all that. Animal skin and pelt was very expensive. And we're not talking about like cowhide or goat hide or that kind of leather which is used for manufacture, but the kind of leather that is more of exotic animals. So they went out, they procured all these, spent a lot of money on this because they're expensive. And so they put all these gifts together, and Amr, who knows, these in the nobles now, who are also like, they're part of the priestly order of the Najashi, they're part of his administration. He knows who is who and what each one will like and what not. So they start putting up all these gifts together and packaging them all. So now they give them instructions and tell them, deliver this to every high official, right? Every, you could say, a patrician or an aristocrat, like a noble individual who is also part of the administration. So they're not just aristocrats who feed money into the government, they're part of the government. But because it's a country that is fully merged insofar as their state affairs and their religious affairs are fully merged together, the bishop would have equally as would be a state representative just as equally. It's very hard for us to conceptualize this today because we don't have such a situation. But in the medieval times, going back now, even like for in the Western world, like the British Empire, well, not the British Empire, but the English, for example, early medieval period, they had like bishops who had official roles in the monarchic system of governance. So these were called these were the bitriq, the partitions or the aristocrats, the noblemen of Najashi's government. So they said, take idfa ila kulli bitriqin hadiyatahu. Take for each of these noblemen their individual gift. قبل أن تكلم النجاشي فيهم. Before you go to speak to Najashi about them, our people, the rebels now, right? So they're referring to those who migrated. So before you go to speak with Najashi, first go and talk to all these noble individuals. Meet with each of them, give them his gift, and sort of work your magic on them, right? ثم قدم إلى النجاشي هداياه. Then present yourselves before the Najashi and present to him his gifts. ثم سلاه أن يسلمهم إليكما قبل أن يكلمهم. Then ask him to surrender these rebels to you without consulting with them, before he speaks with them. So they're sort of setting this up now. They're concerned that these Muslims, if they go and speak to the Najashi, because the Najashi, it's not like he received them at the front gate, when they came to his country. Like he likely doesn't even know that they're there. They came in, maybe they spoke to some, government official or something. We've come to stay here, whatnot, permission. Like you get a visa, you don't get it directly from the president of a country. You get it from the Office of Immigration or something like that. So the president doesn't really know that you're here. Similar, allegorically similar. So this is how they're setting it up now. What they're telling him is, listen, go and meet with the Najashi, but before you do that, take all these gifts for each of these. They actually sat down and they selected the gifts for each of these aristocrats. This is basically a bribe. Let's call it what it is. It's a bribe. They wanted to bribe each official and get all those officials on their side, so that when they come to the Najashi to present them, naturally he's going to ask him, his advisors, what do you think? What should we do here? And then they can speak for the Qurayshi delegates. So they're setting it up like that. Now, when the second group had migrated, Abu Talib did something very interesting. he composed a few lines of poetry and sent it with the second group. It's beautiful. It's just a few lines, like maybe four or five lines thereabouts. He said, "Ala layta shi'ri kayfa fi الناء جعفر وعمر وعداء العدو الأقارب." He said, "Oh, but I wish to know, how fares in those distant lands Ja'far and Amr and the enemies of the enemies and the kin. Like it's kind of like a poetic way. وَأَعْدَاءُ الْعَدُوِّ الْأَقْرَبِ. They're like enemies and friends at the same time. So they're still part of family, but then they're like created enmity between them. So he's saying, how I wish to know, how well are they faring in that land? Ja'far, my son, and Amr, and all these other individuals who are. Amr is the one who has been sent to sort of do the counter offer, right? He's the delegation from the Quraysh, Amr ibn al-As, and Ja'far is the one who is leading the second group, going to Abyssinia. So, they're both related. They're kin, they're cousins, but then they're also enemies. So I wonder how this is going to play out. But he's not really talking about them. He's now talking about to the Najāshī directly. He's saying, وَهَلْ نَالَتْ أَفْعَالُ النَّجَاشِي جَعْفَرًا وَأَصْحَابُهُ أَوْ عَاقَ ذَلِكَ شَاغِبُ. And did they confer, like the deeds of the Najāshī? Did Ja'far receive those good deeds of the Najāshī? The welcome of the Najāshī and his companions, did they receive that? Or did something, mischievous come in to create a wedge between them? And then he says, تَعَلَّمْ أبية اللعنة أنك ماجد كريم فلا يشقى لديك المجانب. كريم فلا يشقى لديك المجانب. He's saying no. He's doing like a direct address to the Najāshī. No, oh you أبيت اللعنة, who rejects the curse, meaning it's another way of saying like you whose tongue is not vile, like you don't speak vulgar. Know that you are noble. Annaka majidun, you're a noble individual. Karimun, you're generous. And those who are close to you, even though they might be strangers in your domain, they don't suffer. تعلم بأن الله زادك بسطة وأسباب خير كلها بك لازب. نعم بك لازب. Know that God has endowed you with great expansion. He's increased your generosity, and He's increased the means to goodness, that they all cling to you. وأنك فيض ذو سجال عزيرة ينال الأعادي نفعها والأقارب. And that you are overflowing with abundance. ذو سجال غزيرة, like of great emulation. You're someone of great emulation, whose blessings yanalul aadi nafa'aha wal aqaribu, that whose blessings they reach foes and kin alike. Now he's referring foes and kin. This is like a poetic way. He's saying, I know what the Quraysh are trying to do. They've sent, my son is there, Ja'far, okay, and he represents me. And then there's Amr also, and he's representing the other Qurayshi. So I know what these guys are trying to do, and they're kin and foe alike. But I trust that in your capacity, that you will treat them both fairly, and you will grant them both, you'll approach them both with ease, because to me they're both my people. It's, I mean, just beautiful if you understand it in the Arabic, the way I think I was doing a very bad job of translating that, because it's the way it's composed. It's very difficult to translate metaphor. But anyway, it's just, when I read his poetry, especially in the Sirah, I find it very difficult. It burns me on the inside when I hear then ignorant Muslims start saying things like, oh, he's in the fire, he never said La ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha. He died a kafir. When I hear people saying nonsensical things like that, it just burns me. When I read this poetry, it just doesn't seem like the kind of individual who would be thrown in the fire. I don't know. Wallahu alam, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge him. But here is an individual who never rebuked the Prophet. He never shunned him away. He never mocked him. And not just the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, being his nephew, but all the Muslims. He even went to the extent, inshallah, next week we will look at the boycott on Banu Hashim. He even went to the extent of suffering that without compromising. So for someone to condemn him or cast judgment upon him when it's not even their right to do so, it's not a good thing. And Muslims we should be giving husn dhan to others. Let judgment be Allah's. Who knows, maybe on Yawm al-Qiyamah, it's his paradise, it's his day, he is Malik on that day, Malik Yawmiddin. He is the master on that day. So it's his prerogative whom he wants to admit into paradise. And we, husn dhan, we pray that he, as the Prophet's uncle, receives paradise. Why not? After all that he has done. Don't you think his Lord will reward him for that? Wallahu alam, whatever Allah decides at the time. We should not be the ones to cast judgment. So anyway, I don't want to get into that discussion. So, he sends this poetry to Najāshī. Najāshī now, he's getting all this. And so Amr and they come in before the Najāshī. Now, Salama actually narrates what transpires in the whole scenario now. So what they did is these two of them, they came with all their stuff, right? All the gifts. And what they did first is they came to meet with each of the nobles. And the bishops now. They were bishops or patricians. They're basically the nobles. And so they come to each of them and they have like a prescripted message for each one. They come and say, إِنَّهُ قَدْ ضَوَى إِلَى بَلَدِ الْمَلِكِ مِنَّا غِلْمَانٌ سُفَهَاءُ. And they tell him, listen, what's happened is from us, there are these foolish youth, just probably adolescent, something like that. They're just not thinking. They've actually fled from our land and they have come and entered into the king's land. Like as if making it look like as if it's something illegal that they did coming into the land, and illegal what they did leaving our land. And they say, فَارَقُوا دِينَ قَوْمِهِمْ. They have differed now from the religion of their own people. They have branched off. وَلَمْ يَدْخُلُوا فِي دِينِكُمْ. And they're not coming even to join your religion. You see, like this is, that soft tongue, the slippery two-forked tongue that's playing around here. See, they're not even coming to join your religion. وَجَاءُوا بِدِينِ مُبْتَدَعٍ. They've kind of now invented their own new religion. لَا نَعْرِفُهُ نَحْنُ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ. We don't know what this new religion is, and neither do you, by the way. There's real threat here, because basically what they're implying now, they're insinuating, if you let these people stay here, then they'll start spreading this new religion of yours. Next thing you know, you've got an epidemic here, the same as we're dealing with over there. You don't know what this new religion, they've just invented it. It doesn't follow any other religion. He's making this up, right? Because the Abyssinians, they don't know. They don't know that this is a continuation of their own religion, right? So they just, وَقَدْ بَعَثَنَا إِلَى الْمَلِكِ, and we've been sent to the king, فِيهِمْ, concerning them, أَشْرَافَ قَوْمِهِمْ, by the nobles of their people. See, look at the terminology he's using here is very, very subtle. You would miss it, but it's very carefully fine-tuned, and it's there in Arabic. They're excluding themselves and making themselves look like a neutral party. We're just the messengers, don't kill us. They're saying, listen, they have abandoned the religion of their forefathers, right? Faraku dina qawmihim, they've differed from the religion of their people. Walam yadkhulu fi dinikum, they're not coming to join your religion. Waja'u bidini mubtada'in, they're making their own innovations. They've invented their own religion. La na'rifuhu nahnu wala antum. Fear of the unknown is what he's planting into them. Listen, I don't know what this is. You probably don't even know what this is and what it can do. So we've been sent to the king by their people, the nobles of their people, ashrafa qawmihim, their elders are the ones who have sent us. Liyaruddahum ilayhim, that the king would return them to their own people. You see? So this was like the scripted message for each individual, with slight variations here and there depending on whom they would be speaking to, and a few embellishments also added in, some praising and all that, but this was the core of the message. So, and what they were telling each one is, as they were giving them their gifts and everything, they were saying, now فَإِذَا كَلَّمْنَا الْمَلِكَ فِيهِمْ, when we speak to the king concerning them, فَأَشِيرُوا عَلَيْهِ بِأَنْ يُسَلِّمَهُمْ إِلَيْنَا وَلَا يُكَلِّمَهُمْ. So when we speak to the king concerning them, فَأَشِيرُوا عَلَيْهِ, just give him a hint, give him a signal, you see, that he surrenders them to us without consulting with them. فَإِنَّ قَوْمَهُمْ عَالَ بِهِمْ عَيْنًا وَأَعْلَمُوا بِمَا عَابُوا عَلَيْهِمْ. Their people, they watch over them. They know what they're doing and what shame that they have committed. So, let their people deal with them. In other words, this, influence the king in such a way as to, foremost, it should be very subtle, so that it doesn't seem like we are the ones who have prompted you to do this. That's why he's saying ashiru. Give him an ishara, just tilt him in the right direction, but don't make it too obvious that you are acting on our behalf, and make it seem in such a way, use the right words and talk to him, diplomatic words, make it seem as though it's not something he should really concern. I mean, he's the king. Why would he be worried about some tribal affair happening in Arabia and whatnot? Let him just surrender them to us, and we'll take, and let their people deal with them. Why you guys want to carry this mess and this burden upon yourselves? And the bishops now agreed that this is chicanery, right? This is the double speak. Sophistry is being carried out here. So the bishops all agree. They've got their new gifts and everything. Which is really, it's a bribe, so it's not really it's okay, let's call it a gift, but it's really a bribe. Anyway, so they now go, and now they meet with the Najāshī, and so the Najāshī is there now. Okay, these are the delegates from the Quraysh of Arabia, the people of the house. And the Najāshī knows the people of the house, going back to what happened to one of his predecessors, right? Abraha. And so there was a kind of a respect here, because the Quraysh had built a reputation as people of God. You see, the people of the house that Abraham built, which he protects. So yeah, he's going to meet with them because he's their delegate. So they meet with him, they gain an audience, they bring him gifts and everything, all that. And then they tell him that, this is the situation, they've rebelled against their own people, and they fled and into exile into your country. And it's kind of like, we want to save you from having to deal with them. So, just if you give the order and expel them from your land, then we can just take them and let their people deal with them. But the Najāshī, we did not receive this very kindly, especially when now, the nobles started giving him that ishara that they were bribed to give. They say to him, Sadaqa ayyuhal malik. They're saying the truth, O king. قومهم أعلى بهم عينا وأعلم بما عابوا عليهم فأسلمهم إليهما فليردهم إلى بلادهم وقومهم. They're saying the truth, actually. If you think about it, their people know exactly what crime they've committed, and they're watching over them. It just makes more sense. It's much wiser to just send them back to their people. Let them do. Why should we go through the headache? And Najāshī was not happy with that advice. So he said to them, Laha Allah. Laha Allah. God forbid. إذن لا أسلمهم إذن لا أسلمهم إليهما ولا يكاد قوم جاوروني ونزلوا بلادي واختاروني على ما سواي. I will not surrender them to him. There is no people who come near me, settle in my land, and then choose me for protection against others. حتى أدعوهم فأسألهم عما يقول هذان في أمرهم. Until I call them and I ask them concerning what these two are saying about their affair. فإن كانوا كما يقولان أسلمتهم إليهما. If what they say, if it turns out to be true about what these two are saying about them, then I'll surrender them. وَرَدَدْتُهُمْ إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِمْ and they can return them back to their people. وَإِنْ كَانُوا عَلَى غَيْرِ ذَلِكَ مَنَعَتْهُمْ مِنْهُمَا وَأَحْسَنْتُ جِوَارَهُمْ مَا جَوَارُونِي. If it turns out to be other than that, then I will protect them from these two. And they can stay here. I shall treat their stay with kindness so long as they dwell here with me. So a messenger was now sent. Summon them now. Call them to the king's hall, to the throne room. And the Muslims are now concerned because they never thought that they would have to deal with the Najāshī directly. So they're all now looking at each other and saying, what are we supposed to do here? مَا تَقُولُونَ لِلرَّجُلِ إِذَا جِئْتُمُوهُ. What are you going to say when the man, what are you going to say to the man when you meet him? And then, that, وَاللَّهِ مَا عَلِمْنَا. We don't know what we're going to say. وَمَا أَمَرْنَا بِهِ نَبِيُّنَا صلى الله عليه وسلم كَائِنًا فِي ذَلِكَ مَا هُوَ كَائِنٌ. We don't even know. The Prophet never instructed us as to what to do. So we have no choice. We'll just have to see. Whatever will come to pass will come to pass. But they were really anxious to why the Najāshī wants to suddenly meet with them. And so they go to the throne room now, where the Najāshī has now gathered his entire court, right? And he's got like his bishops and all his noble advisors, and they're all there. And the bishops, they all have their scriptures also open, because they were told that this is a religious matter now. These guys are opposing our religion, and they haven't accepted your religion. So, we need to figure, they're basically saying, we're going to have to figure out what exactly these guys are up to. So they've got their own scriptures open also. And remember, it was a state that was merged. It's not separated, state and religion, two different things, a separate legislation. No, judgment was based on the state's religion. So if you are in Aksum, you were judged by the Christian law. Similar to if you were in the Muslim land, you were judged by what the Muslims, the Sharia. So they're all gathered there, and the Najāshī now, starts to question them. And he asks them now, ما هذا الدين الذي قد فرقتم فيه قومكم? What religion is this that I hear you have left that you have left your people for? وَلَمْ تَدْخُلُوا فِي دِينِي, and yet it is not a religion that you come into. It's not my religion that you come into. وَلَا فِي دِينِ أَحَدٍ مِّنْ هَذِهِ الْمِلَلِ, neither is it any religion that belongs to any of these other communities. Remember, Aksum was a superpower, so it was also a central hub. There were a whole group of other communities either living there or passing through. There were Indian peoples there. There were some Chinese would pass through if they were doing merchantry. The Romans would be passing through. Some of the Jahili Arabs of southern Arabia, the Jews were there also. So there was a multicultural thing going on as well. And Aksum itself, which is the capital city, was the magnet for all these groups of people. So what's this new religion that I'm coming to hear? Now Ja'far was the one selected by the Muslims to speak. And this is also the hikmah, because Ja'far, he's young, he's the Prophet's cousin, so he's close in relation. And he's also got his own incredible personality. He's a handsome individual. He has a pleasant face. Someone you could approach, you could talk to. He had a beautiful voice and a remarkable eloquence, which we'll also see from the way he speaks. So Ja'far was the one who was selected to speak. So Ja'far says, Ayyuhal Malik, O King, Kunna qawman ahla jahiliyatin. We were a people, who lived in ignorance. Na'budul asnam. We worshipped idols. Wa na'kulul maytata. We ate dead flesh, carrion. Wa na'atil fawahish. We committed indecency. Wa naqta'ul arham. We severed ties with kinship. And in this case, he's speaking about, like petty things. I don't want to know you as a brother anymore, stuff like that. وَنُسِيُّ الْجِوَارِ, and we mistreated our neighbors. Case in point, how Abu Lahab and Uqba treated the Prophet ﷺ, next door neighbors. وَيَأْكُلُ الْقَوِيُّ مِنَّا الضَّعِيفِ, and basically, we were a society where the powerful ate the weak. The strong among us ate the weak. You see? فَكُنَّا عَلَى ذَلِكَ, and we remained this way. حَتَّى بَعَثَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْنَا رَسُولًا مِنَّا, until Allah sent to us a messenger from amongst us. نَعْرِفُ نَسَبَهُ, we know his lineage. وَصِدْقَهُ, and his truthfulness. وَأَمَانَتَهُ, and his trustworthiness. وَعَفَافَهُ, and his purity. فَدَعَانَا إِلَى اللَّهِ لِنُوَحِّدَهُ وَنَعْبُدَهُ وَنَخْلَعَ مَا كُنَّا نَعْبُدُ نَحْنُ وَآبَاؤُنَا مِن دُونِهِ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ وَالْأَوْثَانِ. And he called to us, to Allah, to unify him, to worship him alone, to abandon what we and our forefathers had worshipped before from stones and idols. وَأَمَرَنَا بِصِدْقِ الْحَدِيثِ, and he commanded us to speak with the truth, or to speak truthfully. وَأَدَاءِ الْأَمَانَةِ, and to fulfill our trusts, وَصِلَةِ الرَّحِمِ, and to maintain our kinship bonds, وَحُسْنِ الْجِوَارِ, and to be good to our neighbors, وَالْكَفِّ عَنِ الْمَحَارِمِ وَالدِّمَاءِ, and to refrain from forbidden sinful acts and from bloodshed, وَنَهَانَا عَنِ الْفَوَاحِشِ, and forbidding us from indecencies, وَقَوْلِ الزَّوْرِ, and false speech, وَأَكْلِ مَالِ الْيَتِيمِ, and consuming the wealth of the orphans. Because that's what they used to do, it's just somebody's father died, instead of giving them. If you look back at Al-Khidr and Musa, that third part of the journey where he repairs the wall, that's one of the concerns, because this is something that's very old. It's still there today also. And that's why he repaired the wall, because there was their father's wealth under that was preserved for them. If that was discovered, the people would just consume it. So, this was something that was prevalent, and it's still there today. وَقَذْفِ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ, and to slander those, the women who are chaste and pure. وَأَمَرَنَا أَن نَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ وَحْدَهُ, and he commands us to worship Allah alone. لَا نُشْرِكُ بِهِ شَيْئًا, not to associate with him anything. وَأَمَرَنَا بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ وَالصِّيَامِ, and so he's explaining now to him the part, what is it that this religion is about. He's answering his question, because he asked, what religion is this? Najāshī wants to gauge, because there are two requisites, foundations to a religion, right? There is dogma and there is doctrine, what we call usul al-din and usul al-fiqh. Basically, aqidah and sharia. There is what you believe in, and then there is the legislation by which you act and live out your life. So this is the genius of the man. He doesn't have to spell it out in that sense, but in his eloquence, you can see these are the things that he's highlighting. So he's not giving him just factual information. He's articulating it in a way that it really gets to him. It settles in his heart. See? So he commanded us to worship one God and not to associate any other deity with him, and to pray and to give alms and to fast. At that time, Hajj was not prescribed for them yet. So that came in later on, because they were still in Makkah at that time. There was no Hajj given to them yet. So he basically he enumerated the foundational duties of Islam, of submission. You see, فَعَدَّدَ عَلَيْهِ أُمُورَ الْإِسْلام. That's what he enumerated the foundations of Islam. And that's what he's saying. فَصَدَّقْنَاهُ وَآمَنَّا بِهِ. We believed in him and we affirmed his truth. وَاتَّبَعْنَاهُ عَلَى مَا جَاءَ بِهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ. We followed him in what he has brought from Allah. فَعَبَدْنَا اللَّهَ وَحْدَهُ فَلَمْ نُشْرِكْ بِهِ شَيْئًا وَحَرَّمْنَا مَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْنَا وَأَحْلَلْنَا مَا أَحَلَّ لَنَا. Worship him alone. We associate nothing with him. We forbid what he forbids, and we allow what he allows. And now here he's explaining the portion of the conflict that their own people actually had. Amr came with a case and said, look, they are opposing our religion, meaning they're opposing our way of life. Ja'far is saying, we're not doing that. We're not opposing anything about you. We're not rebelling against you. We are still maintaining kinship ties. We are only prohibiting what God says should be prohibited. We are allowing what he says we should be allowing. Then he said to him, فَعَدَى عَلَيْنَا قَوْمُنَا. So, for this, our people turned on us. فَعَذَّبُونَا. They persecuted us. They punished us. وَفَتَنُونَ عَنْ دِينِنَا. They forced us to leave, to abandon our religion. لِيَرُدُّونَا عِلَى عِبَادَةِ الْأَوْثَانِ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. So that we would go back to worshipping stones and idols from worshipping Allah. وَأَن نَسْتَحِلَّ مَا كُنَّا نَسْتَحِلُّ مِنَ الْخَبَائِثِ. And then to indulge in what we considered at once to be vile. They want us to go back to that. And Najāshī is not a fool. He's well aware of geopolitics. He's well aware of how the Arabs indulge themselves. He doesn't even need to ask for details. They all know how the Arabs indulge with their affairs. So when he's saying that this is what they do, that their way of life is a vile way of life, according to Christian doctrine, and according to all those bishops standing there with their scriptures open, they know exactly what this man is saying is the truth. And it makes no sense whatsoever that once you have taken a path of piety, that you be forced back to that older way of life of, khaba'ith, basically, which is immorality, right? And for that to be justified, it just doesn't fit. And so Ja'far continued by saying, فَلَمَّا قَهَرُونَ وَظَلَمُونَ وَضَيَّقُوا عَلَيْنَا. When they overwhelmed us and they oppressed us and they constricted us, basically. وَحَالُوا بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَ دِينِنَا. And they then became now like a barrier between us and our religion. خَرَجْنَا إِلَى بِلَادِكَ. We escaped to your country, to your land. وَاخْتَرْنَاكَ عَلَى مَنْ سِوَاكَ. And we chose you as our protector from them, from others. وَرَغِبْنَا فِي جِوَارِكَ. And we hoped that we would not be wronged by anyone. وَرَجَوْنَا أَنْ لَا نُظْلَمَ. And that we would not be oppressed by anyone. عِنْدَكَ أَيُّهَا الْمَلِكِ. As long as we are with you, dear king, O king. Now Ja'far did not script all this, by the way. He didn't come up with all this. It wasn't something premeditated. He spoke in the moment. But what he spoke was the truth as it came to him in the moment. And in doing so, he demonstrated basically 100% of what the Qurayshi delegates were primarily accusing them of. Because he didn't only give the right facts, he was also sincere in his speech, meaning they could read the sincerity. They could see that he's saying the truth. Maybe they don't understand the whole of it because they don't know this religion that well, but they could see the sincerity in his speech. And so the Najāshī then asked him, هَلْ مَعَكَ مِمَّا جَاءَ بِهِ عَنِ اللَّهِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. Have you brought anything with you that your prophet, do you have anything with you that your prophet brought from God? And Ja'far, being the brilliant man that he is, intelligent man, he said yes. And then he recited from Surah Maryam, the first group of ayats that mention Zakaria, Yahya, and then Maryam, when she is now pregnant, when she gets pregnant with Isa, until she gives birth to him. And when he finished reciting, this is somewhere about, I think something about 25 ayat, basically just that first section of Surah Maryam. We don't have time. We could go through all that, but I mean, those are just, even in and of themselves, they're just beautiful verses, ayat. And when he finished reciting, they were all in tears. The bishops were in tears. The Najāshī himself was in tears. Their scriptures were open and they've got like teardrops blotching the parchment. And he said to them, Inna hada walladhi ja'a bihi Isa la yakhruju min mishkatin wahidatin. This and what Jesus brought with him are from the same lamp, They are from the same light source. Intaliqa. He turned back to the other two, to Amr and to Abdullah. He just told them, intaliqa. Just go, both of you, go. فلا والله لا أسلمهم إليكما ولا يكادون. You just go, because by God, I will not surrender them to you. They are not to be touched. They are not to be yielded. Amr was, and these guys, they were so humiliated in that situation. I went back to their accommodation, and now they're starting to deliberate. They've come all this way, but now they're no longer representing the Quraysh. Amr is just, his ego has been punctured badly. I know I'm speaking ill of him right now, because he does become a Muslim later on, and he does play a very, very prominent role as a Muslim. But inshallah, when we come to that, I will do my best to elevate him, because he is a Sahabi. He is a Sahabi, and he deserves to be honored as well. But at this junction, at this point in his life, he was now humiliated in front of all these nobles and the Najāshi's statement dismissing him entirely. And he said, you know what? Let's go back to, he's telling his companion, let's go back to the Najāshī tomorrow, and I am going to tell him something that is going to destroy these individuals, these guys. He's going to, he said it in a kind of a poetic way. It's going to get rid of the greenness in them, this green pasture that they're enjoying, right? Because they came here, grass is green on the other side, looking for that. I'm going to tell him something that will destroy all that. So he come, and Abdullah is very concerned about this. He said, no, don't do that. Because what he wanted to say, he said, let's go back and tell him what they really think about Jesus. Because Ja'far was smart. He didn't recite the entirety of Surah Maryam, right? He just gave the first two sections. And he didn't cite any of the other ayat that had come down about Isa. And by the way, the language they were speaking is Ge'ez, which is what we would call, like, it's a parent of Amharic. It's different from Arabic, but it is like, it has similar words here and there. So they were able to, and then, we translated, because it's an official court, so they have a translator. And that's how they were able to communicate between the two. So Amr decides, let's go back and tell the Najāshī what they really think about Isa. That's going to now put them in their place. And Abdullah is now skeptical about this, saying, no, you know what the Ethiopians are going to do to them if you tell them this. And these are our family. These are our own people. We have relations with them. But Amr now was, I don't care. I'm going to tell Najāshī that they claim that Jesus, son of Mary, is an abd. Now, abd in that regard is a low thing. It's a slave. So here now, this is going to create a huge problem, you see. But he wouldn't listen to reason there. So he went back. They went back, both of them. Abdullah kept quiet. Amr is the one who spoke to the Najāshī. Ayyuhal Malik, innahum yaquluna fi Isa ibn Maryama qawlan azima. O king, do you know that they say about Isa, son of Maryam, a very, very grave thing? فَأَرْسِلْ إِلَيْهِمْ فَسَلْهُمْ عَمَّا يَقُولُونَ فِيهِ. Send for them again, call them again, and ask them what they mean by it. What is it that they're actually saying? So again, now the messenger was sent, call them back. Now the Muslims are concerned. Now they're looking at each other again. Because remember, Ja'far had not extended his recitation to the entire surah. So there are a lot of ayat that the Najāshī did not hear. He only mostly spoke about Zakaria and Yahya in the beginning, and then Maryam and the angel coming to her and telling her about the good news, right? So now they're looking at each other and saying, now what are we going to do? If they ask you about Jesus, what are you going to say? Again, they say, you know what? We will say whatever Allah and His Messenger have given us. We will just say that. There's nothing for us to hide. And then whatever is ordained will come to pass. Whatever Allah has decreed for us, that's what's going to happen. Because they know if there's the slightest slip of the tongue, they'll be beheaded right there and then. So they went. Once again, Ja'far was the spokesman for them. And so Najāshī then pressed his query. What do you say about Jesus? Ja'far replied, نَقُولُ فِي الَّذِي جَاءَنَا بِهِ نَبِيُّنَا. We say about him whatever our Nabi has brought. Whatever our Prophet has said, that's what we say about him. So we're not making this up, okay? This is what the Prophet has said. Huwa Abdullah, that he, Isa, is Abdullah, is the servant of Allah. He's not just Abd. See, Amr made, again, chicanery. He omitted one part. They say Jesus is an Abd, which is not the proper complete because it's mudaf ilayh. Huwa Abdullah. You see, he's not just an Abd. He's the Abd of Allah. Wa Rasuluhu, and his messenger. Wa Ruhuhu, and his spirit. Wa kalimatuhu alqaha ila Maryama al-Ghadra'il Batul, and the spirit and the word that Allah thrust into Maryam when she was a virgin. And when he completed that, the Najāshī lowered his hand to the ground. He picked up a small stick, very tiny, like a twig or something. Picked up a small stick. And he said, Wallahi, ma'ada Isa ibn Maryam, ma qulta hadha al-uda. He's saying there's no difference. Very small stick. I don't have one here. Very small stick. There's no difference between what you said and what Jesus, son of Mary, himself or said about himself. The difference is about this much. Very slight difference. That's it. There's nothing else. There's not much. Maybe a semantic difference here and there. And when the Najāshī said that, his bishops now, they have like their whole staff with the cross on it, the whole staff. They started banging their staff on the ground, and they scoffed. So the Najāshī said to them, "Wa inna khartum, wa inna khartum." Even if you snort, that's like a nakhara is like a haughty scoff, like when somebody's like say something and they like listen to what this guy is saying, something like that, right? So wa inna khartum, wallah, even if you snort, doesn't matter. This is what I think, doesn't matter. So he told the Muslims, idhabu, just go. Fa'antum shuyumun bi ardi. In this land, you are shuyum. I don't know what that word translates to. I have not found an equivalent translation of it. But in the Arabic dictionary, it's like basically you're like a client, you're protected. So I don't know what the exact translation for that would be. But he himself explains what shuyumu, and I think this is actually an Aksumite word that he used at that time. وَالشُّيُومُ الْآمِنُونَ. The shuyum are protected. مَنْ سَبَّكُمْ غَرِمَ. Whoever harms them will bear consequence, and whoever opposes them will be punished. He gave them leave. He said to them, مَا أُحِبُّ أَنَّ لِي دَبَرًا مِنْ ذَهَبٍ وَأَنِّي آذَيْتُ رَجُلًا مِنْكُمْ. I do not desire a mountain of gold in exchange of prejudice against a single man from you, to cast bad justice on you. And then he turned to the two delegates, Amr and Abdullah. He says, Ruddu alayhima هداياهما. Give them back their gifts. فلا حاجة لي بها. I have no need for them. Now this is a very huge, you know, like motion by the king in terms of the social, the way the culture operates. He says to them, فوالله ما أخذ الله مني رشوة حين رد علي ملكي. He calls it a bribe. He says, by God, I did not take a bribe, or rather, God did not bribe me when he entrusted me with the king, with my kingdom. فَأَخُذَ الرِّشْوَةَ فِيهِ. I'm not going to take a bribe as the ruler of this kingdom. وَمَا أَطَاعَ النَّاسَ فِيَّ فَأُطِيعَهُمْ فِيهِ. And he did not obey the people concerning me, so I will not obey the people concerning him. Meaning, this is his affair. These are his people. I'm not going to listen to what people tell me about them in terms of judgment on them. And I'm not going to take a bribe. So, that way, he's just calling it a bribe straight out. And here are the two Qurayshi delegates. They've spent all this money. They've come all this way. It's a long journey. Must have taken them at least a month to get there, And it's a terrible situation that, like, for diplomacy wise, if you were to picture yourself in that room, the tensions would be so high that a ruler, would give you back your gifts and call it a bribe in front of everyone there present and say, give it back. You don't return gifts like that. It's not considered appropriate. But the fact that he calls them out for it and tells them, you try to bribe me. You literally try to bribe me to sway my opinion over these people who have done nothing wrong. Yet you claim that they have done something wrong. And yet when I ask them to speak, they speak the truth in front of me. I cannot pass judgment over this. This is a different matter. This is not some petty dispute amongst you. This is to do with religion. And the Abyssinians, they didn't actually like that at all. But anyway, afterwards, Najāshī. And by the way, this statement of his has there's a deeper wisdom to it, because his father was the ruler, Najāshī. When he was a child, his father was the ruler. His uncle usurped the throne from him, because Najāshī was the only son, whereas his uncle had 10 sons or 11 sons. So, his uncle wanted to keep the Aksumite, the kingdom and its monarchy intact. That way, rulership would always have an heir. And that's the reason this is what the story goes like. This is the reason why he usurped his brother. But then later on, he was struck by lightning, his uncle, and he died. And they took that as like a sign from God that he was not the rightful owner. So then rulership was then bestowed again back to now this Najāshī, the real one. So this is what he is now referring back to. I didn't take a bribe from God, or rather God did not bribe me when he returned to me my kingdom. فَوَاللَّهِ مَا أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِنِّي الرِّشْوَةَ حِينَ رَدَّ عَلَيَّ مُلْكِي. God did not take a bribe from me when he returned me back my kingdom. فَأَخُذْ رِشْوَةَ فِيهِ. I'm not going to take a bribe on, with regarding to the same, or as far as my rulership is concerned. And he didn't consult the people regarding passing judgment on me, whether I was worthy or not of his favor. So I will not consult with people regarding whether these other people are worthy of his favor upon him. And so the Muslims were given leeway, and they were allowed to stay there. But the Abyssinians did not take very kindly to his position. For one thing, their egos were also damaged in that situation, because the fact that now everything was called out. The fact that he called the gifts bribes, which means the same gifts which were given to his bishops were also bribes, and that in the first meeting they actually supported the delegates. which clearly indicates also to Najāshī also that, yeah, they took a bribe. You see? So their corruption is also called out in the same public setting. When I say public, I'm talking about the court, not like outside in the public. And so there was a kind of now rebellion being stirred within. And so what Najāshī did is he called Ja'far and had a private conversation with him later on and said, I made some arrangements. There are some boats that I've prepared for you. I'm facing a kind of, conflict within my own government. If I'm defeated or pressured by others, then you should leave with those ships. However, if I am victorious, then you can stay here and live for as long as you want under my protection. And then what he did, this is again his own hikmah. What he did is he wrote on a piece of paper, he had it written, he wrote it down. He wrote, Huwa yashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu wa yashhadu anna Isa ibn Maryama abduhu wa rasuluhu wa ruhuhu wa kalimatuhu alqaha. He basically wrote that he has testified. He's indicating Ja'far. Ja'far has testified basically that there is no God but Allah. This is Ja'far's testimony. He's writing it down. And that Muhammad is his servant and his messenger. And that he's also testified that Isa, the son of Maryam, is his servant and his messenger and the spirit and the word of God that he cast into Maryam. And he put that in a piece of paper and he folded it into his robe just above his, like on his chest. He didn't tell anyone that he's done that. He kept it on his person. Then he went out and met with these nobles and everything who were now protesting against him. And he asked them then, Ya ma'ashar al-Habash, Ya ma'ashar al-Habasha, alastu ahaqqa an-nas bikum? Am I not someone who has earned a right among the people with you, meaning to rule over you? And they said, yeah, no. And so, he asks them, فَكَيْفَ رَأَيْتُمْ سِيرَتِي فِيكُمْ? So how have you seen me insofar as your ruler? How have I conducted myself all this time as your ruler? What's your opinion about me, basically? And they said, خَيْرَ سِيرَةٍ, we have seen the best from you. And so he asked them, فَمَا بَالُكُمْ? What then is the issue here? What's the problem with you? And they say, well, فَارَقْتَ دِينَنَا, you have strayed off from our religion. وَزَعَمْتَ أَنَّ عِيسَى عَبْدٌ, and you're now claiming that Jesus is a slave. Now this is a serious matter because their creed, which is following the Nicene Creed, this is a doctrinal issue. It's an aqidah point. And so, negating an aqidah point in any religion is kufr. And this is what their concern is, that you're doing kufr on our religion. And so he asks them now, فَمَا تَقُولُونَ أَنْتُمْ فِي عِيسَى? So what do you guys say about Isa? Like, what's your opinion about Isa? And they said, نَقُولُ هُوَ ibn Allah. We say that he is Ibn Allah, he's the son of God. And Najāshī then, he put his arm on his chest. Now, this is the genius of the man, why he did that. So when he wrote it on that letter, he put it right there. So that he could now, like he had already worked this out. He had already worked out these steps. This is chess. They're playing checkers, he's playing chess with them. He had already anticipated. This is, if you look at the line of questioning, he basically led them to that point. Because he wanted to be naturally be able to put his hand on his chest and then say, Huwa, him, meaning Ja'far, the representative of the Muslims who's come, Huwa yashhadu anna Isa ibn Maryam lam yazid ala hadha shay'an. He testifies that Isa, the son of Maryam, is no more ala hadha shay'an, Now he meant ala hada shay'an, but they thought he's referring to ala hada, their words. They thought he's referring to their statement, huwa ibnullah. But in truth, he was referring to the folded piece of paper that he had put in his chest, in which he wrote down Ja'far's testimony. And so he's telling them that he testifies that Isa, son of Maryam, is no more than that. So the Abyssinians said, okay, we accept that. The delegates, the nobles, they said, okay, we accept that. But it wasn't just like, they were idiotic or naive about it, because what he did was the way he did it. It's not about the statement or the fact, it's the way he did it. By using that chest gesture, which is an important part of a social contract. And the Turks still do this. It's very, it's got its own measure. It's a gesture of assurance. By doing that, it's a gesture of assurance. So the Abyssinians thought that he was addressing their claim, right? No more than what you said. He's saying no more than what you said. They thought that he's referring to that. He was referring to the written statement in his pocket, which fundamentally articulates both Muslim and Christian belief, i.e. that Jesus is a servant, he's a messenger, he's not divine. That's fundamental. Everything else is additional. So whatever is in the Nicene Creed is an addition, which is a kind of a reconciliation. I don't want to get into the details of all that, but that's what it is. It's a kind of a reconciliation between differing opinions and schools of thought in the early or later period of Christianity. But fundamentally, where it comes to the foundational structure of the creed, the kalima affirms is the same affirmation. God is one. God is one. Jesus is his messenger and his servant. And that's foundational. Everything else is additional in the creed. So these priests, they were looking at the letter of the law. They were following the textbook that has been handed down to them. But he was looking at the essence of the law. He was looking at because that's what he connected with when the messenger came to them, to him, the messenger from the Muslims, who is Ja'far. When he was conversing with Ja'far, this is what he got from Ja'far. Ja'far was not giving him the technicalities of religion. He was giving him the essence of religion. If you look at what he was talking about, morals and ethics and way of life, prayer to God, chastity, abstinence, he was talking about virtue and all these things. You see, that's what he saw the haqq in it. They were stuck on the arbitrary law of it. And mainly because, in part, their own egos had been damaged as well. Now, he is Najāshī, he is the ruler. He has to consolidate his power. Otherwise, he's going to have a problem on his hands. He will get deposed. His kingdom is going to tear itself apart. All kinds of issues are going to happen, especially when you've got power-hungry politicians who are hovering nearby. So he has to play a game now. This is what he's done in this case, is he's written this thing, put it in his chest pocket, and now he's showing them that I am giving you an assurance. See, he didn't tell them about the letter, but by remaining silent about it, he avoided a direct confrontation while still upholding the truth of the Muslim position and his word of protecting them. At the same time, he didn't need to convince anybody about the theological positions. It was already something that was granted, that there would be differing positions, right? Because they're following a prophet who is an Arab prophet, and Christianity is something different. So it's already known that these are two different things. He doesn't need to go into the nitty-gritty and the semantics of theological positions here. All he needs to do is to signal to his government that the matter has been settled under his authority. So he does this deliberately. He puts it in his pocket, in his chest, so that he can touch that and not lie while giving his position. And at the same time, it becomes in and of itself a gesture that symbolizes assent and formal commitment. In other words, Once he does that, nobody would question him because he is the king who is himself the arbiter of this matter. So this was, this is the political genius of the man. If you understand how those traditional historical courtly ways operated. Anyway, I think I've spoken for quite a while. So I think we'll stop here, inshallah. The Muslims lived in Abyssinia for a long time, for almost 10 years plus, and they never had any issues whatsoever. Some of the Muslims did come back after some time. They visited once or twice, but they were alhamdulillah, they were preserved and protected under the Najāshī in Abyssinia. So anyway, let's stop here, inshallah. Take a quick break, 10 minutes. I will go and pray Maghrib, and then we can resume for some question and answer. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khairan. See everyone in a few minutes. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Let's get started, inshallah. Any questions?
Sister Hina, you can ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustad.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Go ahead, inshallah.
My first question is, why did the Quraysh want these people back? I mean, they had got rid of them for good because they just left. So, is it some kind of, tribal honor or something they have against them?
Well, yeah, it's a kind of a tribal thing. What they didn't want is their reputation being ruined among the Arabs and the non-Arabs as well, to be then classified as the people whom, their families have been split internally over a new religion that has come up, and then the so self-proclaimed lords of Makkah, lords of the valley, the ones whom God favored, they couldn't fix this. They couldn't sort this out. So this was their key concern. They didn't want that to happen. And then, number two, this was not like an ijma' thing. They didn't just all of them think alike. It didn't work. It didn't really work that way. A lot of it was based on internal influences, particularly from people who had the biggest egos, and it was just from them. It was just a reaction of hatred. So looking at people like Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab, these type of individuals. Abu Lahab, because from the very beginning, the first time that they had this, the Prophet ﷺ invited them. From that point, he just had a negative outlook. And there's people are like that. You just, from the very get-go, they don't like you because of something you said or whatever, drop them the wrong way or something like that. And now, because they also have power and influence, they're just using that to their advantage and corrupting others along the way. You see? So, for example, when Utbah went to the Prophet with that proposal, then he heard the recitation and he came back, and the Quraysh asked him, well, how did it go? And he's saying exactly what you're saying right now. Let's just leave him. Let's just leave him. If he succeeds, mulkuhu mulkukum wa izzuhu izzukum, his dominion will be your dominion, and his, izzah, his nobility and whatever will be yours as well. Just leave him. A lot of this is, by the way, many of the discussions that were going on, this was actually a constantly forwarded idea. Let's just leave them. Let's just let them go. But then you had people like Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab and Walid ibn al-Mughira and Uqba and all these, the Mustahzin mostly, just couldn't swallow that pill, just couldn't because to them it was like they're accepting defeat. They're giving up. And now they don't want, the other Quraysh to say, oh, so Muhammad defeated you, eh? They didn't want that kind of to bring themselves, even though that would never have happened to them, but they just couldn't swallow it. Abu Lahab, they told him that all you have to do to disprove Muhammad is to become a Muslim, because once you do that, then your becoming a Muslim nullifies the ayat that were sent down against you, and hence, because once you muddy the waters, now the whole thing, it can be doubted. So you could disprove the entire message by just becoming a Muslim, even if you're doing it as a munafiq. But he didn't do that either. Why? Because of his own ego. So this is the way they were approaching it. They just didn't want to swallow it, in that sense. That now other Arabs, other prominent tribes, were not Meccan tribes, but there were other tribes also who were very powerful, coming into Makkah, and then they start saying, oh, so this is what's going on with you guys. Huh? This poor orphan has defeated all of you. They didn't want that. So they wanted to go to Abyssinia, capture all these individuals, bring them back to show, first and foremost, nobody gets away from our authority, and then to also demonstrate that they're still in control of the problem. They're managing the situation. They wanted to show it in that way.
Right. And another question. So when the Prophet sent the first group of people, so did he write a letter of protection, or did he send a message? Because they must have met the king. He must have known that they're taking shelter in his land. No?
Yeah. So there was, because that was protocol. So he would have, though there's no evidence and there's no actual letters that are collected, but he would have definitely sent a letter as an authority himself, because they are his people. So he would definitely have sent a letter. Now, whether or not this was directly with the Najāshī, or it was addressed, care of, kind of sent to whoever the authority would be receiving on the other hand, but he would have definitely sent a message. Although he didn't write it himself, he had scribes who did it. Either that, or one of the group that he sent, who would, in this case, they say that not Uthman ibn Affan, the other Uthman, who is Uthman ibn Mas'un, who was like sort of the Amir of that first group, would have been like the delegate who speaks to whichever office or officer was receiving him at that time. But there was some official sort of conference or discussion, a kind of a diplomatic mission that was involved in that as well. They wouldn't just go and settle down in the land, no.
Jazakallah khairan. And the language you told us, they were speaking Gaze, and these people were speaking Arabic. So because of the trade, did they have an understanding of each other's language?
Not necessarily, but they would have had translators, official translators.
Okay.
Yeah, they would have had official translators in the courts. And the Ge'ez is actually a Southern Semitic language. It's a branch of, it's got Semitic elements as well as Hamitic elements, but it's primarily a Hamitic language. So they would have had some sort of similar terminology used, although the grammar systems would be different. I think that I haven't really studied that language as much, so I don't know much about it. But they would have had similar words, and because of trade and exchange of goods, these kind of communities often had interchangeable terminology. It's very similar with Persian and Arabic. There are many words that are interchangeable between the two languages, or even in this case, Urdu and Farsi. Many of the terminologies are borrowed between the two languages. So they would almost understand with each other, and then with the help of a translator in such official situations, they would have an official a court translator, you would say, who would be there and would make sure that there's no misunderstandings happening between any of the individuals speaking.
Right. Okay. And another question. You talked about, you told us about the Christians being sympathetic towards Muslims and not being oppressive like the Jews, and even this incident having some sort of eschatological significance. because of the end times, the alliance between the Muslims and the Christians. But you have specifically said that the Najashi, he had a pure aqidah about Jesus, especially about Isa alayhi salam. And even in the opening ayahs of Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says, وَيُنْزِرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ وَلَدًا, warn them who talk about Allah taking a son, Nauzubillah. So what about this kind of talk that the Najashi was worshipping Isa as a son of God, and still the Prophet sent a delegation to him. So it is okay to to have an alliance with the Christians, knowing that they are worshipping Jesus.
Yeah, it's okay to have an alliance with them. Yes.
But you
Because
cannot.
here you're not debating over doctrinal matters with them. You see, you're looking for protection. So, for example, if somebody is leaving, let's say, one of these, like people who left Syria during the civil war and went to seek refugee status in Western countries, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a kind of a similar, I'm not saying the same situation, but it's kind of a similar situation, right? There's nothing wrong with that, as long as the place that you're going to is not a place that is going to cause injustice on you. And that was really the prerequisite when the Prophet ﷺ made the proposal. See, he didn't talk about, oh, there's a Christian there, and don't worry about this stuff and that stuff, and just like, he didn't do any of that. All he said to them was that, look, here is Ard al-Habasha, and the ruler there is la yuzlimu indahu ahadun. He's not an oppressive ruler. He's not unjust. Wa hiya ardun sidqun. It's a true land. Like, there's truth there. You see. So go there and you'll find protection there, at least relief for some time. So this was a political move. It was not a religious move, right? And even from it's actually the Qurayshi delegates are the ones who made it a religious matter. This is the devil's work. This is how Shaitan operates. Between human beings, we don't need to bring in our religious differences in order to have a common goal. You see, if my neighbor is a non-Muslim and he needs my help, I can go and help him. I don't have to say, oh, wait a second. First of all, you need to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I can't, that doesn't hold a precedence. And the same is the other way around. If I'm in trouble and I need his help, then he can help me and I can accept that help. I don't have to say, no. My aqidah, your aqidah are different. Yeah, I can't accept your help. There's no such precedent in Islam that's prohibited to do. In fact, even in Judaism and even in Christianity, there is no such precedent. Even in Hinduism, there is no. I'm talking about the base religion. I'm not talking about the nominalistic religion that's added on afterwards by people and other groups and classes and all this, right? Like in now Reformed Judaism, if it's a Sabbath, the Jew will not help anyone. Even if there's somebody dying right outside his doorstep, he will not lift a finger to help him. Because why? Oh, it's Sabbath. I'm not supposed to be helping, which is not true. It's not true in the normative religion, which is Judaism. It is not true that you're prohibited from helping another, unless he's a Jew, apparently, then only I can help him. So that kind of thing, that what you're referring to, that is added stuff. It's stacked on top of the foundational religion. It's a bid'ah in and of itself. And when analyzed, it actually holds no reason. There's no sensibility in religion for it to be there. It's just what people add on top and can easily be dismissed as an opinion. It's not foundational. And so Najashi in this case, even when he's relating with Ja'far, he's not following the nominalistic religion. He is looking for the commonalities where the essence of the religion lies. Why? Because the Christian believes that there is only one God who created everything. You, me, the Jew, this one, that one, and the other one. Even the one who disbelieves in him, he created him. You understand? In essence, that's essentially what we are looking at. The Muslim believes the same thing, that he is one, he created you, me, the Christian, the atheist, the secularist, everyone, even the devil worshipper. Okay? So going on that level only, insofar as we are two human beings, is there cause for me to persecute you? That's what Najāshī is looking at. There is a case from people whom our country, our nation deals with these people. They brought a case. Is there any validity to their case? And Najāshī now does not step in as a theologian, he's stepping in as a judge. This is his court now. And as one of the fundamental rules of carrying out justice is you always listen to the other side. You don't pass judgment based on what the complaint only is saying, the complainant is saying. You have to call the other side and now bring in the defendant and say, what do you have to say in your defense? Here is the case against you. So Najāshī is now judging this based purely on haqq, on truth. And this is where Ja'far succeeded. He didn't bring in opinions and views and all that. This is the genius of the man. You see, this is how the purity of Islam, the language of Islam is speaking through him. He just gave him the foundational truth of it. Look, this is what we were, and this is what we have been transformed into. Now, this is what these people want to punish us for, and we have come to you for protection. Now you decide what you want to do. Did that make sense? Do you understand?
Absolutely, Ustad. But in the second instant, Najāshī did that trick with the letter in his chest sleeve, in his garment. If he had not done that, then these people would have really been against giving protection to people who are calling Isa alayhi salam just an Abdullah.
But that's not what he was trying to do. What he wanted to do was to avoid this thing turning into a theological conflict. He didn't want that. He didn't want it to be a theological conflict. He wanted to show them, and his own people as well, that look, I'm not saying that he's Abdullah. I'm still a Christian. I'm still the same individual. I'm not saying that. That's what they're saying. That's their belief. And we can accommodate that. There's no reason for them not to stay here. The same goes for you. But at the same time, what's interesting about this is where we get into now, like the subtlety, right? The nuance, and also subtext. What's spoken but not said. It's like spoken behind the words. So he's not affirming what they're saying and saying, no, I also declare Ashhadu anna Son of God. He didn't say that. You see, he just affirmed the foundational statement that Ja'far provided, that Isa is the servant of God, is the messenger of God, is the spirit and the kalima, the word that was thrust into Maryam, which is truth by itself. As far as the doctrine goes, the Christian doctrine, that is a fundamental creed. The idea of Son of God actually comes later. It's an added point. It's an added creedal point. It's not a fundamental creedal point, which is why in the first 2 centuries, this was a heavily contested matter. And it was already destroying the Christian community. The Najāshī, they know this. It's not that far off in their history. It's maybe 300 years off. It's very short, because 325 is when the Council of Nicaea was held, right? And here we are in 610, that's probably 615 now. So it's just about another 300 years past. So it's something that occurred also in not that close recent, but compared to us in their recent history. This was already a contested matter, and it had already torn the Christian kingdom apart at that time. So many divided sects, all arguing over the same point. Najāshī was looking at what Constantine did at that time, who was the emperor of Rome, and he acted as a ruler in his position when he established the Council of Nicaea in order to resolve this matter and hold the debate and decide once and for all what is it that you want to follow. He acted as a ruler, not as a theologian. Najāshī is doing here a similar thing. He has to act as a ruler, not as a theologian, not as a priest. right? And so he's playing this game in order to not take it not to escalate it any further. Are you happy with this? Okay. Are you happy with this? Okay, let's move on. See, this is again genius on his part.
Ustad, later when we read about the letters that the Prophet ﷺ he wrote to Hercules and Caesar, so there was a similar incident there. I think, I don't know if it was Hercules or Caesar. He gathered all the royals in the court, closed the doors, and asked, "What would you do if I were to say so and so?" And when he saw that they were against calling Jesus
Yeah.
messages, so he said, "No, but I believe in what you're believing." But here,
Yeah.
Najāshī, he has accepted what Ja'far radiallahu anhu said, because he knows
Yeah.
in his heart that is the truth. So the same
Yes.
thing happened here, but to avoid the political turmoil, later the same event happened, right?
Similar, but in terms of Heracles, it was a bit different. Heracles was mainly defending himself. Najāshī was defending his kingdom. He was acting in the proper position that he was in. Heracles was different. He was mainly he because he tested it out, you see, with his. We'll come to that situation. And it's a very interesting, because first he has a discussion with Abu Sufyan, I think, was the one who spoke on behalf of the Quraysh. First he has the discussion, and then he actually affirms that there is a lot of truth here. But then when he speaks with his priests and he sort of gives them a hypothetical and says, if I was to accept that, what would happen? Like, what would you say to that? And then they say, well, we would do this and we would that, we would depose you, we'd get, and then he said, no, I was just testing to see your faith, if you is truthful. He covered himself up anyway, but that was a different kind of cover up. That one, he was saving his own nafs. Here, Najāshī was not doing that. He was not saving his own nafs, because he already established it with them in the first statement when he said to them, do I not have a right as your ruler? And they affirm, yes, you have a right as your ruler. So his kingdom is not a threat. He's affirmed that. The only thing now at that point, this is again, we have to read between the lines. He's already affirmed with them that his rulership is not a threat. The only concern they have is that, do you endorse that Jesus is an abd as a ruler? Because then we have a problem. And he says, I affirm what he affirms, and he affirms that no different than any more than that about Jesus. So he kind of, there's an ambiguity there between what the bishops are understanding, right? And then he plays on that ambiguity for their sake also. So just like that, he just avoids a confrontation entirely. So the matter doesn't go any further. And then he gives them an assurance as a ruler, not as a priestly ruler. See, he's not a religious ruler, Najāshī. He's a religious man, but he's not a religious ruler. He's making a distinction. Unlike now the Byzantine emperor, who is a religious ruler, he's a patriarch, which you will see later on also after, when it comes to the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem now, when the Byzantines have to surrender Jerusalem, Umar radiallahu anhu meets with a religious ruler. The Romans presented themselves like that. They presented themselves as the authority behind that. You see, the rulers is basically what he says is doctrine. He's representing God's nation on earth. That's how they saw it. The Abyssinians did not, and this is why the bishops can question him. Are you committing blasphemy here? And Najāshī has to resolve that as a ruler, not as a religious leader. Yeah, I understand the distinction here.
This makes sense. I understand it now. Jazakallah khairan. One last question. Other people are waiting. Continuation of this. Like you said, this is the devil's work. So even like we are coexisting with the Hindus very peacefully, so to say. But some people will take out matters like, oh, you know, these Muslims, they say bad things about your idols. If they get a chance, they will destroy your idols. They say that you
Mm,
will go to fire and that kind of thing. This creates so much of hatred. It's very hard to actually answer people who, because you have to explain to them that, okay, ultimately you have to go to the truth, to the root of your religion. You have to see what the root is, that there is only one God, and everything else you have to disassociate yourself with everything that is false in your religion. So
mhm.
ultimately, it becomes a theological discussion. Even living peacefully becomes a kind of theological discussion where you have to actually explain the whole reality of what Tawheed is, what God is. So it's not that easy
Yeah,
coexisting, especially in this age where you know you can just Google anything about the Quran, pick an ayah out of some place, and
point
just
taken.
misquote it somewhere else.
Yeah,
So it
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, definitely. It's not easier. I know I had friends who were Sikh. They were Gujarati. I had friends since I was a kid. Alhamdulillah, we never had any issues between our families, wherever we lived. My parents and their parents never had any problems. Because we never brought religion into the discussion anyway to begin with. We both they conducted themselves with respect. We conducted ourselves with respect, and there was no problem there. And we never had any conflicts. Conflicts arose much later on. Now, I mean, one thing I'll say on this note is that a lot of conflict in the modern age, with regards to religion, really arose when modern media came into effect, because the spread of information has made not made, I would say, has sort of blown things out of proportion. It's like you said, somebody can just as easily go online, you know, find an ayah, even that a translation of it, which has been poorly translated, bring it out and say, oh, look, this is what the Muslims say about you guys, you see. Kill them wherever you find them. This is what they want to do. They want to just destroy the whole world. They want to kill everyone up. So that creates a lot. This overwhelming this explosion of information being, and now AI just makes it even more worse, because AI will validate a lot of user input. So many of people who are looking for an excuse to hate on another person's religion can load their queries in such a way that it feeds into that validation and just gives them evidence sufficient enough to support their argument and creates more hatred. But anyway, we're living in the age of the Dajjal, so these things should be expected, and anticipate even more of this kind of things until the fever reaches its maximum. Subhanallah. Shouldn't joke about
exactly.
this. Now, any other question?
Brother Hassan, you can ask a question.
I fell asleep. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
All right, there's two questions. One is relative to what you're talking. The other one is something that is very important now. It's about Miraj. And I think it's happening in a week's time. And I think we've lost the essence of Miraj because it's more like a miraculous travel log going into the heavens without understanding the true implication of it, the centering of Bayt al-Muqaddas in the life of a Muslim. And I think with all what is happening now, that I think you need to emphasize that. The regret is that because we have this habit of saying big nights, and Miraj doesn't fall into a big night, so there's no lectures in the masjid, nothing happens. And with about 3 generations of people don't even know what Miraj stands for. So I think there is more important existential issues that I think if we want to bring back the dignity of Miraj, then we have to center the geographical importance of Miraj and why didn't the Prophet ﷺ go from Makkah, I think, to Medina and then go up to that. Although it was in that step, but still the importance of the third haram. What I did is one. The other one also on this beautiful part of that you've covered so well, I looked at it as a more of an economic come political migration. There was no issues of the people that left for Hijrah, the first one, that they were persecuted, because persecution only came afterwards. To support that, meaning that the people who were in Abyssinia only returned during the time after Nabi Sallallahu, I think even after the Battle of Uhud, so say between the Battle of, even after the Battle of Khandaq. So there was relatively security for them. So afterwards it became difficult, and there was security in one area, but they were not persecuted, right? And the reason that I think Nabi Sallallahu sent them there, that it was more a strategic move, thinking that, look, if things get difficult for us in Makkah, we have to find some places. And I think Abyssinia was the ideal place because of the ruler and because we had no differences with the creed of Christianity. We have no dispute about the Bible. We may dispute the people, how they've interpreted. So when we argue with a Christian, I'm not going to say, I disagree with I respect your Bible, but I disagree the way you look at Hazrat Isa as the son of God. And that. So that's a different issue. And I think you said it very eloquently that Hazrat Jafar had that in him to take it off, not from that point or what the people were saying, but just to hit this. So if you want to elaborate on it, I appreciate that. But I also want you to bring back the importance of how important marriage is and why after the age of Husn, the time when there was such one great depression, that Allah did something that no Nabi had the opportunity of coming to come to that point of Siddhul Muntaha and beyond. And then, I mean, the whole struggle of the process. I mean, Jazakallah, I put all that in one, and you can help me on understanding that maybe bigger.
Inshallah, we'll cover Isra wal Mi'raj in a future session. Probably three more sessions we'll come to Isra wal Mi'raj. Three or four sessions. Just before Ramadan starts.
Because it's now happening. So at least
I would love to, but it will take up all our whatever time. It's not something I can put into like a few minutes. Like I said, like you're saying, it needs to be given its importance. So I want to really go in depth. This is why I've dedicated a session just for Isra wal Mi'raj. I don't want to do it as a passing thing, something that's just done on the side. So probably the one after next or the one after that, second or third. Next week, inshallah, I want to do the boycott. And then probably the one after that or the one next we'll do the Isra wal Mi'raj. I'll go into the detail of both journeys, the Isra part and then the Mi'raj part as well. Because I think, like you said, both of them require their... unfortunately, the timing is such that, if it would have come before the actual date of Mi'raj this year, then it would have been more beneficial, I guess. But Allah ordains things in a certain way by His wisdom. So we'll cover it when we come to it. It's a very weighty subject to look at. There are a lot of details. I've been wanting to write a book on this also, but I've never really gotten down to compiling it all together because there are many narrations, the multiple events, and then there's also the matter of how do you make sense of some of these events? What do they mean? But Isra wal Mi'raj is, I think it's an amazing part of the Prophet's life. I think I only touched on it very briefly in my book, The Divinity of Time and Cosmology. Just a few paragraphs. I didn't really go too much into it. But inshallah, we'll go into much more detail when we come to the session. As for the migration to Abyssinia, the persecution had already started based on the statements of some of the Sahaba. Like Uthman, for example, he was under heavy pressure by his uncle. And that's one of the reasons why he left and chose to leave. Amr ibn Yasir was said to be among them as well. And he left after his parents had passed away. And many of the other Muslims had also done the same. If you look at Ja'far's statements to the Najāshī, he does say that, when we decided to follow this prophet, فَعَادَ عَلَيْنَا قَوْمُنَا, our people turned against us, فَعَذَّبُونَا, and they persecuted us. وَفَتَنُونَ عَنْ دِينِنَا, and they tried to force us to go back to their way of life, their religion. So persecution had already started happening, and the persecution took a while. It took I think a couple of years at least. They were being persecuted, 2-3 years. And so the Prophet ﷺ tried to make arrangements with whoever he was able to, but he gave them free option of whether they want to leave or not. He didn't impose it on them. And yes, it was political. It wasn't a religious thing per se. When we say it wasn't religious, means it's not something that he did it because of religious issues, or that he was trying to gain a religious advantage with the Najāshī or any such thing. Political in the sense that it's a very pragmatic matter. Here you're being persecuted. Here is the option. You can go and settle down somewhere else where you will be safe. Whoever wants to do that can do that. Later on, the hijrah, the main hijrah now comes in of Yathrib. And there now is a major commandment because the Prophet himself is told to migrate. And so, that's where even the hadith of innamal a'malu binniyat becomes very important, because in that hadith he says, فَمَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, to wherever the Prophet went. Right? So that becomes a different, but here this is like a smaller scale migration. It's very small, they're just about 150 people, they're not that many. And some of them even came back after some time. But many of them, like you said, yes, they did stay there for almost 10 years plus until, they, after Uhud took place, some of them like Habiba, though she was already wed to the Prophet, her nikah was done. She came back after Khaybar. After the conquest of Khaybar is when she came and migrated to Medina. So many of them stayed there. They had established households. Their children were born there. They grew up there. So they had stayed there for quite some time, yes. They didn't come back just immediately once the persecution had ended, because they kept hearing news also, about what's happening in Makkah. So along with the persecution, many of them escaped now the persecution. In this case, they escaped persecution. And persecution is still going on for some of the lesser fortunate ones, those who didn't have the ability to travel, because you still needed, the ability to travel, whether it's physical ability, or it's also some funds, because you need to be able to take it's almost a month plus of a journey, plus a sea voyage. So it's not an easy journey to make. So many of them couldn't travel. And then in addition to persecution, then came the boycott, which just made matters even worse. So, they were hearing the situation is getting worse and worse and worse. So they just stayed there until good news came to them. Now the Prophet has gone to Yathrib. The Aus and Khazraj have given him protection now, and protection for the Muslims, and he's established himself. And now Badr was fought and there was victory there, and so on. And so now then they start coming back slowly, one by one. Now because they've settled down in Abyssinia for so long, they now settle their affairs, and then they now head back into Arabia. Did that answer your question on that?
It clarifies. While you were talking, that it brings us to the present time, right? Muslims are in many parts of the world, right? And we have what you call soft power, right, all over. Which is, if you put that together, it's a phenomenal power, and it can make difference in world politics. So in terms of these types of persecutions, and we see when Hazrat Uthman returned, when he came back to Medina, he had the funds to purchase the Bir Uthman. It's a lot of money, right? And he did also a lot of other things that while he was in Abyssinia, he transacted, and he did well for himself. And that was used now for the betterment of Islam. So this also brings us to say that we have lots of places Islam and Muslims are suffering, but we also have soft power. And this is a time, I think, that we have to bring back that reality of Muslim soft power, because it's not a question of leadership, it's out of the question. And I think this is what the strength lies in. And I think that maybe we should make ourselves aware of the powers that we have in the situation that we are learning today. Abyssinia as an example, everywhere else. Jazakallah, Sheikh. I don't think it needs commenting, but I think if you enlighten more, it will just make it easy for us to understand that. Jazakallah.
In political theory, one thing about Muslims is it's rather strange, uncanny situation with Muslims. Muslims cannot be governed by any other system. I'm speaking pragmatically. just cannot be governed by any other system other than a Khilafah system. Any other system that applies just doesn't seem to work when it comes to Muslims. And that's because our religion in itself allows for diversity and allows for difference of opinion. And when being governed by that, by a religious doctrine and a religious law in which there are differences of opinion, it becomes a problem, it becomes difficult. So establishing any other system of governance, for that system of governance to work for Muslims, not for Islam, but for Muslims, it has to be a secular system. There's just no other option for it. And this is where you see countries like that are still trying to hold on to that monarchic system of rulership in the Muslim lands, like Saudi Arabia, for example, and some of the Gulf states and Arab states. These are among the places where Muslims feel actually most suffocated because of them trying to reconcile a unified doctrinal system and apply it forcefully. Whereas it only works if you have a Khalifa, because a Khalifa is somebody that the Muslims unanimously give their bay'ah to say, yes, we want you to rule over us. But here in this case is some other person has come in and consolidated power and said, I'm going to be your ruler, I'm going to be your king, you see? And in countries where Muslims are relatively thriving, you have got this modern democratic system of governance. It's a system. Khilafah is not a system of governance. This is where I think the discussion needs to really take on a more mature term, because Khilafah is sort of compared in likeness with other systems of governance, but Khilafah is not a system. Khilafah is a concept. It's not an ideology. It is a fundamental concept of religion. It is a concept that in its axioms, in its principles, it states that the ruler is somebody who is self-accountable. The Khalifa, in and of himself, is self-accountable. Self-accountable means that the only authority that he must fear is the authority of God.
Salam.
You understand? Now, when you look at Abu Bakr, Uthman, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, all four of them, why they are the standard of Khulafa, Rashidun, is because that's the way they governed. The only authority that they feared was the authority of God, and they maintained that. And the people also saw it in them, and that's why they gave them that. Anyone after that has always failed at upholding. I mean, there are many who have shown themselves to be righteous, pious rulers, yes. But in terms of a monarchic system of governance, a sort of a kingness, a muluk, or then coming down to the like empire states, like the Mamluk, for example. Then you've got the Ottomans. The Ottomans, a lot of people call them the Caliphate, the Ottoman Caliphate, but it wasn't a caliphate. The Ottomans never wanted to establish an Islamic rulership. The Ottomans wanted to establish an Islamic version of Roman rulership. They didn't want to establish Muslim rulership. They wanted to establish a Roman version of rulership. It's not a Christian version, a Roman version. They wanted to establish that sort of kingdom. So you see, that's the Ottoman Empire. They wanted to make an empire. So the idea that Khilafah has always been part of and it got abolished in 1924. No, it didn't. Khilafah was gone 30 years after the Prophet died away. After he passed away, 30 years after that, Khilafah was done. He himself said it. 30 years after my passing, then you will start the period of empires and nations, and then it will come period of tyranny. So, this is in a nutshell. When it comes now to the modern state, a Khilafah will only function if there is a collective agreement as to who the Khalifa should be. And in current position, that's an impossibility. It's impossible to say that so-and-so one person will be. No, because everyone now is only in anticipation of the rightly guided Khalifa. And that's why he is called that. He is Al-Mahdi. He is called the rightly guided Khalifa because his appointment now, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is going to appoint him. So the idea of having a Khilafah is really a utopian dream that Muslims should be aware of. It's a fantasy. It's not going to happen until Imam al-Mahdi comes. So that large scale sort of unification that we will only do, once the Khalifa comes and then everything will be good. And, once they establish Khilafah, then I will make my hijrah, and it's not going to happen. See, so, my message to Muslims in this case is that if you're waiting for everything to be made ready for you, then you start doing things, you'll be waiting for a very long time. Or rather a short time, but then by that time, it'll be very difficult for you to do anything. Because the moment a Khalifa rises up in the land of the Muslims, and now the Muslims start gathering, you can be guaranteed of war because they will not allow it. The powers that presently be will not allow it. Western powers will not allow it. You see, NATO is not going to sit by while there is a man in Makkah to whom Muslims are pledging loyalty to. No. So if you think it's going to be so easy for you to just take a flight and, now Imam Mahdi is back, we should head out, we're all going out, hashtag Khalifa state. You see, if you think it's going to be like that, you're living in fantasy. It's not going to work like that. So, it's on right now, it's independent effort. That's what I'm trying to say. It's independent effort. Clusters of individuals can come together and make changes that they themselves can bring into effect. But the idea of waiting until a Khilafah state is established, then it happens, it's not going to manifest in that way. And as far as Muslims go, there is no other way for a unified Muslim population. The idea of Muslim pan-Islamic, for example, pan-Islamic rulership, which was something that was proposed in the mid-90s. The idea of all Muslim states, governments uniting, and even currently, like what they have, what is it called? This is it OIC or something like that?
The ICC, Organized Islamic Unity.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, even that, it doesn't work. Doesn't do anything. It's just a get together. They get together, have a
It's an
chat.
apologist.
Right. These things, they don't work. Why? Because in terms of real world, in terms of these are all ideals. You see, they're idealistic ventures. In terms of pragmatic, realistic world, as soon as each ruler, president, king, whatever goes back, prime minister goes back to his own nation, he is subject to his country's constitution. He is subject to foreign policy. He's subject to geopolitics. He's subject to his oppositions. He's subject to politicians in his own cabinet. And that's it. It just dies out right there. Because the systems have been put in place for that reason. So the idea that you're going to get Turkey and Saudi and Malaysia and Afghanistan and all these to sort of one day just suddenly decide we're going to all get together and stand up for Islam, it's not going to happen. Each one is looking out for themselves. Each one is a Turk first before they're Muslim, an Arab first before they are Muslim, a Syrian first before he's Muslim, a Pakistani first before he's Muslim. I am Malaysian first, I am Indonesian first, I am Algerian first. Each one is that nation, is a citizen of his nation first before he's a Muslim. Yes, he can cry at home when he sees all these images on TV and on YouTube and whatnot and feel bad about what's happening in the Muslim world. But aside from that, there's nothing else he can do. This is not defeatist. This is pragmatic. This is a realistic situation. Now, you want change, you have to get up and make change. Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah is not going to change your condition until you make the effort to change it yourself. So if you're going to be waiting now until the Khilafah gets established by some miracle, then, okay, you keep waiting. Anyway, this is, I'm going into a rant. But
No, I think it's necessary because we have this false dichotomy. Somebody's coming up as a new Khalifa, And don't forget, the West wants us to have that and then take the distraction away. So they've manipulated us very well. I mean, now you see what's happening in Jeddah. I mean, come on. Who would ever think of it? They were sitting back. I mean,
Yeah.
biggest wave in the world. So let's step. But the question is that as long as in our hearts we do what little we can, and I think that's important because maybe Surah Kahf, our answers is we may have to find our own caves just to get our strength back and to not to lose our iman. That's not changing the world. I think that's important. Jazakallah, Sheikh. I think everything you said is relative in some way. It fits into the bigger equation. I'm sorry you have to expose it like that, but I mean, somebody has to say it, and Allah give us protection under His arch. Nobody else can help us. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Ameen, inshallah.
Sister Tahira, you can ask a question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, sir.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah for your time and effort for today's session and this question and answer time. I wanted to ask you in referring to the dialogue between Amr ibn al-As, Najāshī, and Jafar bin Sadiq. I think I had heard in some previous sources that Najāshī had turned back at Amr ibn al-As and asked him, "What is your stand against Jesus?" Did that happen? I mean to say, while Jafar was able to say the answer from Quran, and Najāshī was convinced that yes, this is the source which even Bible has come from. So, but now these are Arabs who don't follow anything. Neither do they believe in Jesus. I think I heard from some other sources that he turned them and asked them, "Now what do you believe? You don't even believe in Jesus and you don't believe in their religion. Now you are the third party here, not them."
I haven't come across that. At least not in the books that I have studied from, like Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham. There might be some variant opinions because these were all based on different accounts. But as far as what I've seen in Ibn Hisham's text, I have not come across this. Should be a slight sort of a piece in between. I haven't seen that specifically where he asked the Quraysh delegates as to, okay, this is their opinion about Jesus, so what is your opinion about? Let's hear that. I haven't seen that.
Right.
Unless if you can give me a source, then maybe I can do some research on that to see whether it's an authentic source maybe or not.
I'll get to that. Because this incident again I recalled because I think you mentioned that why Sallallahu prayed on his death.
Yeah, this was later. Inshallah, I'll mention this later on when we are in the Madini period. I'll mention the Najāshī again and his death because the letters were sent out also to Najāshī. There was a letter that sent out to him as an invitation to Islam. So I'll touch on this at that time, inshallah. And then I'll explain also about his death at that time.
I had in our group earlier, I think there was one guy who introduced himself like he's from Ethiopia, and he told that Ethiopia or Abyssinia is the place where Islam came before Medina. So he took pride in this incidents, and I was thinking that there would be Allah's hikmah to send a message in this way and make Najāshī believe. Like Allah knew that this person's heart can be guided. This was the way for him to choose Abyssinia as a place, and Najāshi's I mean, what you call a dawah to Najāshī that he then accepted also.
I mean, it's definitely a blessing in that sense. There's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did, like I said that in the beginning of today's session only, that it's very interesting. There's a wisdom why they were recommended to go to Abyssinia and not any other neighboring town or whatever where they actually have some relations. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Abyssinia, and it's got eschatological ties also, because Christians are close to the Muslims. The Quran does say it. I think the ayah is in Surah Al-Ma'idah, I think. وَلَتَجِدَنَّ أَقْرَبَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً, and you will find that that those who are closest amongst them, the people of the book amongst them, in mawadda, in that transcendental love and affection, لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, from among those who believe, الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى. They are those who say that we are Christians, but not just Nasara in terms of the modern sense of what we say is Christian, but Nasara in the sense of the Nazarene creed, you could say, the Nazarenes who earlier followed Jesus Christ, right? Not Jesus, the Son of God, but Jesus Christ. So there's a closeness that has been established here. Islam, the second group of people to whom Islam has been sent, not as an invitation, but simply as an interaction with, are the Christians. The first are obviously the Prophet's his own people first. But immediately after that, it's not the Jews who get the preference, it's the Christians who get the preference. And even then, he chose Abyssinia and not any of the other Christian lands, like Egypt, for example, or Syria, or which was Byzantium at that time, like part of Byzantium, or the Persians, So there is something there. I mean, if he, like this gentleman, if he took pride in that, that's a good thing. But it should not be a kind of pride that is, gharv, like ghurur. Like, if it wasn't for us, Islam would not have gotten anywhere. That kind of pride, that's just rubbish. But yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses a land like that. Those people should be honored that God chose you. Yeah.
Sure, Ustad Jazakallah. I wanted to again question you regarding your books availability in India. That something I just wanted to remind that is
No, we're
these.
still working on it. I'm so sorry. I've actually had a lot on my plate, and I'm relying on Adil to make the arrangements there. So we're still working on it, and also he's also got much on his plate also. All of us here, we're all, this is all part of our own time that we're trying to make everything happen. So sometimes a lot of things do get delayed, with everyone having different commitments. So I do apologize. And we're still working on it, and also we're trying to work out through like all the finances, because the printery, they can't do single copies. They want like minimum order of 100 books or 200 books printed for a single title. So we kind of have to pay for all that upfront and then figure out storage for everything, and all those costs, they sort of build up. So we're trying to see how we can work all this out.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Ustad, may I ask you some more of your comments on the present day situation happening in Venezuela, and what is this America's behavior, or just going and invading country?
Yeah. I normally don't make a comment when the fitna is going on. I typically wait until the fitna has passed. Then I make a comment based on all the information. But from what it seems like is happening is, first of all, you have to remember that America doesn't operate on its own volition. Donald Trump did not become president because he's a popular man. He became president because he was the better candidate suited to Zionist agendas. As strange as it may seem on the surface, because he's a volatile individual, not so very easy to control, but he's an egoistic person as well. And so Zionists are very clever at chicanery. They know how to manipulate people. And they've got their own people in high levels of government as well to make sure that Trump at least does things that will be suited to their agenda. And part of that agenda is to accelerate their geo or their foreign interests now. Venezuela has always been on the radar of the United States for its strategic stronghold, its power in South America, where other countries have more or less bent themselves to American dominance in South America. Venezuela is among those that still has some kind of defiance, Cuba being another. They're more or less allies in that sense. Plus, its resources are plentiful. And this is something that will serve the Americans for a while. But at the same time, it does create a lot of turmoil in the world. And this is one of the things that the Americans are very useful for when it comes to the Zionist agenda. Because one of the things that it enables is it disrupts the world's, you could say, the global economy and the political dynamics around the world. Because now you have now diverted attention, not public attention only, but political attention as well. Because wherever America takes interest, Russia will also take interest in that. They have to. China will also take interest in that. Venezuela has had dealings with Russia, with China, with Iran. And now it's very interesting that one of Venezuela's allies is under a lot of pressure internally as well as externally. So this is part of that kind of West and East fitna being, triggered on both sides. Now we just have to kind of see where or which direction it's going towards, how it is going to be resolved. Because the American foothold, it's a very bold step that they have taken. And what's interesting about this is they're not being questioned much about it. No one's persecuting Donald Trump for doing what he did, arresting another country's sovereign leader, and putting criminal charges on, and taking him, extraditing him from his own country, and then putting an interim government in play. It's something that is, it's rather strange, you could say, for something like that to happen in modern politics. So we have to see how this is going to play out first. Exactly what is it that Trump is trying to do? Is he lost his marbles, spreading, American wealth too thin? Because he's put his interest there and in Iran and in Greenland as well. So, it's very strange. Is he just off his rocker? Because like we said, he is a very volatile individual and very unpredictable in that sense, also what decisions he's going to make. But rest assured that every decision he makes is going to serve Zionist agenda, whether directly or indirectly. Indirectly meaning that now attention is going to turn away from what the Zionists are going to do next in the Holy Land. And from whatever other thing that they might be doing behind the scenes that we're not really aware of. So, that's the nature of fitna, is that it doesn't just upset the situation, get the pot boiling and start disrupting things here and there, but it also creates distraction, because fitna is an alluring thing. It draws your attention away, distracts you from whatever it is that you were looking at. It has this, that's what fatana means, to draw away. The Arabs used to call some of their daughters fatina, alluring, like she's got a way of grasping the attention of men. It was an attribute they used to give to some of their girls. So that's what fitna is. Fitna, people get very excited when fitna takes place, because now they've got something to do, right? To talk about, to gossip, to discuss. Did you hear what happened? Like this and like that. And most of these people, when there's actual problem in society, they're never there. You'll never find them. They'll never show up at the masjid. They're not there. But when there is fitna, guaranteed you'll get their message. They'll make the WhatsApp group. They'll invite all their friends in there. We need to discuss this. We need to do like this. and then share the video clip, and then share this and share that, and spread the words. We need to raise awareness. All these are the ones who will start doing. They'll be jumping up and down when fitna takes place. It speaks to their hal, their spiritual state. When somebody gets excited at a time of fitna, that person has a very weak spiritual state, a very weak psychological state and spiritual state. So be careful and be wary of such individuals. And just stay away from the social media outpouring of all these clips and updates and whatnot. You don't need those. You don't need to have a constant 10-minute update as to how the situation is unfolding. You don't need to be the one to monitor what's going to happen or what's happening over. There are people who are doing that. There are military analysts, political analysts, there are government officials, foreign dignitaries, diplomats. They're getting paid to do this. So they're doing this. They're watching the situation. They're giving their 2 cents. They're figuring out how to position them. That's their job. That's not our job. That's not our task. We don't need to know minute by minute what is happening next there. You can go on the news websites and get a quick update every, in a day or something to, okay, this is what's transpiring, just to keep yourself informed. It's one thing to not be, you don't want to be completely in the black and ignorant about what's happening. You need to be informed. So keep yourself informed generally, but you don't need to go in depth into it. It's just going to ruin your mind. It's going to put you in a state. So that's my advice to everyone. Don't put too much focus into this. Let those who are analyzing do their analysis. Rest assured, and I always say, don't dive deep into semantics and subjective matters. Politics is a subjective field. It's a semantic field. It will keep on changing. The waters are never stable. It's always fitna. All politics is fitna. All politics is based on desire. It's always going to keep shifting. So don't put your trust in that. You see, don't get into the semantics of it. Understand the universality of what's transpiring. That should suffice you. Don't forget the real reason why you're here. Focus on those elements. The world as it stands today is undergoing a Dajjalic transformation. We are entering the final stages of humanity, the climatic chapters. That should suffice in you understanding what the situation is like. Then recognize how much time you have on your hands and what it is that you need to perform, and focus on that, right? Because the deceiver succeeds when you fail. The deceiver fails when you succeed. So let him do what he's going to do, because that's what Allah has ordained for him to do. You do what you need to do. Don't get caught up in all this stuff and, get too immersed in the eschatological aspects of all this. Most of it is not even eschatology. It's just politics. Okay, don't delude yourself into thinking that, okay, this is part of eschatology, I'm supposed to be doing this. No, that's not part of eschatology. It's just small sub-branch. It's called politics. Let the politics play out, then analyze it. That's when you will be doing eschatology. That's the way my methodology is like that. I wait until the fitna is over, then I look at what transpired, and then I see how does that now fit into the bigger picture. What is its relevance? What is its significance? What are its implications now going further? That's how you do eschatology. You don't analyze a fitna while the fitna is taking place. You don't know which way it's going to unfold. And so any statement you make, any proposition you make on that will be unjustified. Any syllogism or argument or theory you base from that is just speculative. It might be true, it might be false, you don't know. And anything that is speculative starts off a logical sequence in your mind that becomes unresolved if it doesn't have a truthful outcome. And that puts you in a state of distress. This is why a lot of people are in a depressed state. Much of the anxiety and depression the world is suffering from is based on news. I'm not making this up. These are psychological studies done. Much of the depression and anxiety that people find themselves in in the world today is based on news. It's just because they're getting news, there's nothing they can do about it. They can't understand it. They can't conclude by it. They can't interpret it. Nothing they can do about it. And it's just hanging on their heads in the back of their minds. Anyway, long story, but that's my 2 cents on that. I advise, get your daily updates of news on that. Keep yourself informed. Don't get too much involved into it. Spend your time wisely. Now,
Said right, Ustad. I had to tell you because I work in a finance department and our company deals with this US dollars and foreign investments, etc. And they were going mad because dollar is ringing high in India against rupee, and gold is going higher and higher as the silver is also going. So there is an inflation in India basically because of
yeah,
this,
yeah.
because of this activity. And a company like ours are also having so much market activity, which is impacting directly on our daily life. Our salaries are not going high like dollar.
Yeah.
So
And
this
meanwhile,
this
prices of
all
everything are going high.
so we pay our attention or not.
Yeah,
We are paying the prices for it.
definitely. Yeah. But the problem is
Yeah,
that there's not much you can do on that. Now, I understand your point on that, actually, and you're right. One of the things about, and to answer that particular query about the dollar, one of the things that all these fitnas are designed to do is to maintain the value of the dollar at a high state. And the reason they do this is because the US dollar, in and of itself, draws its value from conflict, fundamentally. Okay, any conflict, doesn't matter wherever it is in the world, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in Iran or Venezuela, whichever part of the world it might be. If there is conflict that is affecting the rest of the world, then the dollar will remain high. And that also tells you one thing, that they're not yet ready, because for their plan to be executed finally in its final stages, the dollar has to collapse. The American economy needs to collapse. The West needs to now turn or hand power over to the Middle East. That's when they're ready. You see? So they're not yet ready, is what it tells you as an interpretation. So all this, what's happening right now, this is market reaction. Venezuela has large oil deposits. US has attacked Venezuela. This has happened. Market is reacting. You have to wait and see now how the trend actually goes. First, you'll see the spike, then you'll wait, and then you calculate the Fibonacci difference between that, and you have to give it its time, then it will settle. At a certain point, most likely it will settle at its high value, meaning that the rupee, in your case, is going to maintain its high value. Not high value, but the dollar equivalent is going to be high. It's not going to come back down. The rupee is not going to gain strength. That's what happens to any other currency, which is a fiat currency and is tied to the dollar. Once that currency loses its value, it retains that lost value. It doesn't actually recover in the real sense. So that's naturally going to happen, unless now, I don't know, some other kind of intervention takes place. Unless India decides to buy gold reserves and hold those, maybe it might gain strength.
India is
But
doing that, and again, it is impacting gold prices here, gold and silver prices.
gold will
For the
definitely get affected, because over the last few years, most major countries have been hoarding gold, making it more and more rare in the market to be traded. So they've been buying gold in large quantities and hoarding them to retain their own currencies, the values of their own currencies. So that's why the price of gold is going higher. And again, because the gold itself is being traded in US dollar. So if the US dollar fluctuates, then gold will also fluctuate. It's just that that's the system they've designed it like that. They want to keep the US dollar afloat for as long as possible until they're ready to make their final move. Unfortunately, I think, and this is my interpretation, I could be wrong, the Iran factor and the Turkish factor has made it slow for them. It's made things a bit difficult for them. The resistance from Iran largely and more the physical resistance, and more the political resistance from Turkey, being a NATO nation that has some political voice in the region. That has caused things to move a bit slow for them. They didn't I think they expected that October 7th, 2023 would be something that they could resolve within 6 months, have the whole strip done, and they would be able to move to the next stage of their plan. I think they underestimated themselves, which they have done in the past also, like the 6-Day War. They underestimated themselves a lot at that time. So I think that's what's happened, and so they need to buy themselves a bit more time. How long, I don't know. Either that or there's something else that's happening that we haven't yet been made aware of as happening behind the scenes. It also seems very likely that they don't want attention drawn to that, so they're creating diversions elsewhere. I wouldn't put it past them to try that as well. I'm talking about the Zionists. I'm talking about the followers of the Dajjal. I'm talking about those people. So, Allahu A'lam. That's why I said, at this point, while the fitna is happening, it's kind of difficult to put your foot on something. All we have is a couple of hypothetical situations that we can say, okay, it might be this, it might be that, or this. Let's see how things unfold. Then we can have more evidence to see which theory is actually playing out. But I mean, so it's not just in India. Even here in Turkey, it's happening the same with the lira. It's losing its value. In other parts of the world also, I've had people ask, I look at some of the currency fluctuations from time to time, and I've seen a lot of different currencies are reacting differently. Even though their country is not on the map, it's not on the radar. India, I think, it is pronounced because it is part of BRICS. So definitely it's going to get affected. And it also has a large economy. So, what happens to the Indian economy has ripple effects to the rest of the world. So these are going to be part of their targets.
Yeah, because India's exports are basically to US or UK, Europe. This country has a lot of impact. Basically saying industries here, whatever you see, almost every industry is exporting to America, even ours. So financial situations are.
America doesn't have this is what Trump wanted to do, right? Make America great. He wanted to bring manufacturing back to America because they were leaning now too much towards becoming an import economy. So they kind of lose their power and their strength. But anyway, that's a different now, whole other discussion about geopolitics.
Jazakallah khair, Ustad, for your answer.
Any other question?
Ustad, I don't see any questions. I think we can end the session for today, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Let's end here for today, inshallah. We've been here for 3 hours. Let's end here for today, inshallah. سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته جزاكم الله خيرا to everyone. See everyone next week, inshallah.